we're going to be starting a template that contains most of the files that you are most likely to be using inside of your project. That could be a template that may be given to you, or it could be a template that comes inside Revit. Let's just assume we're going to be starting one in Revit. So we're going to go up to Models and New, and then we're going to go into Browse. And this is going to be a commercial project. If this is residential, I like residential. If it's commercial, I recommend commercial. Easy to remember. Let's go ahead and open one of those. We're just going to be getting in the grids, the levels, and the general footprint. So let's go ahead and get started. With our project started, the first thing you're going to want to do is save. I'm not going to worry about that because that's a whole file management thing that you will need to get into, but you will go to File, Save As, and then Project. And that will bring you your project that you need. And then just save it where you want. You'll just save as project. And I always recommend when you first get started in your building, I recommend three major things: your building information or the project information, the levels that you know exist in the project, even if you don't know the heights, and the grids if you have them, which is more common in commercial or in most new construction conditions. So let's do that in that order. For project information, we can go up to Manage and then Project Information. This is where we could type in some things. You're probably going to get more information as you develop the project, so the data I'm going to tell you likely isn't fully accurate, but this is where you'd put it in. So project issue date, I could just put in today as the date and the date series that I like to use. Project status, let's just go ahead and say we are in SD. We're starting pretty early in the project, don't know where things are laying out. Client name, this is the IBD program I am developing this for you all, so we'll just go ahead and say the client is the IBD. And project address, for now, I am just going to put in the project address. I'm just going to put in Larimer County's Front Range Community College address. The address is the only one. You can't just start typing. You have to go over here to the drop-down box, and that's when we'll put in the 4616 South Shields Street, Fort Collins, Colorado, and I believe that is 80525 on the south side of Harmony, still there. You'll only see the top line in here, but when you go to Sheets, it will have both lines in the area that is projecting that information. Project name, we're just going to call this a starting building until we get better names or establish a name. And then project number. So this is just where I'll do, this is what I'm going to put in for now. Of course, you can put in more of this information as you input it, but you will want to input those under your Manage tab, project information, when you get to that point. So we've got our project information with our project information input. If you do know where your building is, and this is going to be important for this class, you will need to go up to your locations area, which is a little planet with a waypoint symbol, kind of like you'd see in a type of maps application. If you select that, you can put in exact addresses. So I could put in 4616 Shields, Fort Collins, and it will find that exact address within a couple miles. Or I could have also just put in Fort Collins if I don't know exactly where I'm going, and then it'll generally put it in the area. You will want to get quite exact with it because on the lower end level of locating this, you will always want to generally locate every project you have at least to the city that you have, because then when you are doing photometric studies and solar studies and inputting the information or linking this into Forma, Forma likes to see these things, and the other location, the photometrics and everything, like to see these items at the correct locations, because then you will see the sun and other weather environmental effects actually replicate what is going on in that area. So if I have a client in Seattle, Washington, and I want to show them what their house is going to look like today at 5 p.m., based on the model that we built, they would actually want to see that. But you're actually going to be going pretty in depth with Forma's placement and site evaluation and site analysis as you're getting further in the program. So the more accurate you can get, the better. So I am actually going to go for that 4616 South Shields. It's probably not going to put us in the exact right spot. This is our Larimer campus if you've been here. But maybe it's actually this building. And then when you get into Forma, you're going to find that you might have to rotate the building either in Revit or Forma to actually sit on the site correctly. So just be as accurate as you can. But for now, we're just going to put in that information. So project information's in and project location is set. Those are actually kind of the more challenging of them. The rest of them are either known and easy to input or proposed and easy to input. That is the levels and the grids. So I'm not even going to refer to this other building. I just know it's a 2-story building. So if I go into one of our elevations, we're going to have to always do that when we're setting up our levels. We can see that by default with this template, with changing nothing, it comes with a top of footing, bottom of footing, and it comes with a level 1 at 0, and then it comes in with a roof. We know that this has a second level, so we are going to take the roof and let's go ahead and raise it to 25 feet. And then I'm going to make a second level. I'm not just going to copy up level 1 because then it won't automatically offer to make a floor plan and ceiling plan and such for that level. So I'm going to go to the architecture tab. I'm going to go to the level tool. And then I'm going to do pick line and ensure that the line I pick and offset will make plan views, create plan views, ensure that is checked. If I go into plan view types, you'll see that it will make a ceiling plan, a floor plan, and a structural plan. I don't want a structural plan. I'm going to uncheck that. And then I'm going to click OK. And so now whatever line I pick on is going to make a level and the plans for it. I don't want to make a level directly on top of another level, of course. So we're going to want to offset it. And let's say that the second floor is 12 feet above the first level. When I click, it's going to make that level. It assumed level 2 because the last level that was established as a level was level 1. So it just copied. When it made a copy, it just assumed level 2. And then if these heights change, when these heights change, you're going to find when you get more information about the project, or if you get to update this project to reflect your needs more, likely the first case, you'll be given these numbers. And even if you've done some drawing and some establishing of items like core and shell, these items are going to drive your architecture, your building, and are likely just going to update them to make them look accurate and be modeled accurately. So this is probably just good enough for now. I did say a parapet. We may end up having a parapet, so I am going to do that. When you take a level, as I said, if you just copy it, it won't automatically make a floor and ceiling plan, and that's okay for the parapet, because the parapet is going to be a level that we want our walls and such to go up to reference, but we don't need to look at a floor plan of the parapet. We would see that represented quite well in just the roof plan. So I'm going to copy the roof up about 4 feet. And this one is not going to be level 3, so I will click on that name and rename it to parapet. Okay, we've got our levels. Now let's get in our grids. I'm going to go back to the first floor plan. And I am going to see that we are going to have 6 vertical grids and 4 horizontal grids. So let's start with the vertical ones. The vertical ones are 23 feet apart from each other, except for the center is 25. So I'm going to go back into our floor plan. I'm going to go to Architecture tab. I'm going to go to the Grid tool. And then I'm going to draw our grids. I'm going to go ahead and just draw one vertical one for now. And it's going to automatically name it as 1. We want the vertical ones to be alphabetical. So I'm going to change that 1 to an A, capital A. And then now when I go to make more grids, actually, I'll just copy it. When I copy or make more grids, it's going to count itself up. I don't know if it's called counting when you're going up lettering. And it is, my bad joke made me forget things, 23 and 25 feet. So I'm going to select that grid and I'm going to copy it over 23 and then 23 and then 25, 23 and 23. And then I'm going to turn on the grid bubbles on both sides. If you drew it from bottom to top, you would just have to select them and turn on the grid's bottoms indicators. And then we can do some horizontal ones now. So grid, draw horizontal. I think maybe if I turn this on and then copy it, maybe it'll be on both sides. But this one needs to be 1 at the top. And then copy it down. And these are 25, 25, and 10 feet apart from each other. If you didn't have these grids or if you didn't have dimensions, you can still draw them out, propose based on the size of your building. I would just probably focus more on drawing out the building then at that point, and then going back and drawing grids likely based on where the architecture of the building would be. In this case, we're being provided grids. Maybe we've already started talking with the structural engineer, so we are good. I'm going to clean up the space a little bit, select one of the grids, drag one of the endpoints, just work with less of the map here, you know. I want to keep a little room for dimensions when we want to add those in. Okay, so now we've got in our grids. I'm just going to go ahead and dimension them so that we can verify that they were placed correctly and so that we could just persistently keep them on the screen to make sure nothing happens to them. So I'm going to select all of the vertical grids after starting the dimension tool in the quick access toolbar. And then, as with Revit, it requires you to click one last time in blank space to actually place that item. And then do the same with the horizontal. Select 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then place with another click. All right, so now we have to decide what are the grids referencing. We know that they're definitely going to be referencing columns. We'll add those in next, but in terms of the building, we have to decide what part of the building it's referencing. Typically, since grids are structural elements, you're often going to see them reference structural parts of the building, not finished parts. So you may see people put the center of studs lined up with the core grids, or you're going to see the exterior face of the stud lined up with the grids. Well, I'm going to do exterior part of the grids, exterior part of the stud, because that's just what I see most commonly, and it's fairly easy to draw. So I'm going to go ahead and get the wall tool going. I'm going to pick an exterior wall. I'm just going to do the brick on metal stud. That is fairly common, especially against the other exteriors that are in here. And I'm going to ensure that while I'm drawing this wall, it is going up to the parapet level, which could have also been defined down here. And that when I'm drawing it, as I just mentioned with the grids, when I'm drawing the wall, I'm going to draw that the core exterior face, the outer face of the stud, is lined up with the grids as I'm drawing it. So with core face exterior selected, I can now draw the shape of my building, going from A1 over to F1, F1 down to F3, and then over to D3, down to D4, over to C4, up to D3, over to A3, and then up to A1. That gives us our entryway that is jogging out. And then in the back, there is a little jog here for the back exit or entry that starts around C1, goes down about 4'6", goes over about 5 feet, and then goes back up to meet the wall. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to get that wall tool going again. I'm going to start at C1. I'm going to go down about 5 feet because it jogs in 4'6" to the finish. So if I am drawing on the core, the stud, I want to compensate just a little extra distance. Go over the, let's say 6 feet, and then go up. If it seems like I'm just kind of guessworking numbers, I am. We don't have the exact numbers on every single number or on every single dimension. And if somebody gave you this and said, build this exact same thing, then I would still draw it the way that I did it, cut this out, and then dimension it to draw it out, because the amount of math that you'd have to do in order to draw things in the exact right spot while you're drawing it is just unnecessary when it's so easy to dimension and adjust things in Revit, especially early on in the design anyway. So I can demonstrate that as well. I'm going to go up to modify, and I'm going to split that wall because we need people to be able to access that door. I'm going to split it here. And then I'm going to use the Trim Extend a Corner tool to create that alcove by clicking on the two parts of the wall I want to keep on both sides. Let's also increase our detail level and go up to fine or medium so that we can see the wall assembly. And then I'm going to pretty much leave it at this for this level of design. But as I mentioned, if you knew your exact dimensions and size of this back area, you're far enough in that concept, or you're trying to just meet certain codes, you can easily dimension those items and then adjust it as needed to meet those sizings. Next thing I'm going to add in is the columns. You'll see that there is a 2-foot wide rectangular architectural column placed at all these locations. We could also place structural columns. I'm just going to do the architectural columns for now because that is what is proposed in this part of the concept. So I'm going to go to Architecture tab. I'm going to go to the Column tool, and I'm going to ensure that I'm selecting Architectural Column. I'm going to tell this column that it needs to go from level 1, which it currently is doing right now, all the way up to the parapet level. And then I'm going to select the intersection of all of the different grids where these columns would exist, which are basically going to be everywhere except for the 4 locations on grid 4 that are outside of the building. The architectural column tool, you do have to copy or manually place each one. When we get around to the structural column tool, when we have our design more established, that's going to be a lot faster because we're going to be able to just tell it to place columns where other columns are or where grids are meeting. So those will be a little faster. Oh, I missed 2 down there. All right. So we got those in. Next, let's put in our curtain wall system in the front, keeping it very simple. We're going to go to the Wall tool. And in the Properties type selector, we're going to choose Storefront. And then we're going to draw a curtain wall that goes from level 1 up to roof level. And we're going to draw it on the stud of the exterior wall from one side to the other. Now, again, we knew exactly where this needed to be placed. You can use temporary or permanent dimensions to locate that curtain wall exactly where it's needing to go. but I'm not going to do a lot of heavy designing in this because we just aren't there yet. So I'm just going to leave that there, but we do need a double front door. So I'm going to go into an elevation. It's going to go into our south elevation, so we're facing that door. And if we wanted to get rid of all of these grids, we'd be good to just select them and delete them or remove the entire grid, but we don't want to delete this whole column of mullions. We actually want to get rid of just this one. So I'm going to select that one, unpin it, and delete it. That will still split the glass because there is still a curtain grid there. So please select that curtain grid and remove that segment by clicking Add Remove and then clicking back on the segment. You will then tab to select that panel of door. I have to go around the edge or have your face selector select elements by face on, unpin it, and then tell that panel of glass, instead of being a panel of glass, to be a storefront double door. This should be loaded in the template that you load into, the commercial template. If for some reason it is not, you can go into Insert tab, Load Family, and then go under Doors. And then it will be one of these two, depending on if you want the cased, or not cased, but framed door or a more seamless door. But mine did have that loaded in. So I can select it and tell it to be that door. And that's good enough for that design for now. We'll want to add more storefronts in on the rest of this building in the future. But the last thing that we're going to do, that I'm going to demonstrate, is going to be the demising walls on the interior. Now, we're not going to, as I said, get very heavy into designing all of this interior part, but I do want to do some of the demising walls that are splitting up the tenant spaces. So I say we draw in essentially these 4 walls. These walls in between these 2 tenants, I'm going to allow it to keep the 4 1/8 inch partition. We could instead do some masonry walls. I'm likely going to do that around the stairwells, but for now, just to separate out the tenants, this 6 1/8 2-hour wall is going to work great with its double gyp on both sides for more fire suppression. So I'm going to go to our floor plan. I'm going to go into Architecture Wall Tool. And the wall that was being used is the interior 6 1/8 inch partition. Since we drew architectural walls, when we draw the wall's center line going all the way from one side of the building to the other, we're going to see that it will cut out the pieces of the walls that are going through the column. It is smart enough to know that although the wall is continuous, it is going to break up the wall, at least graphically in our plans and other views, to let people know what is going to be going on there. And then if we wanted, we could draw in another wall going from up here and down, which isn't going to be super lined up down here, which is okay for now. That could be something that we could define in our design in the future. But this should be enough to get you started with your core and shell. That's going to locate your project. That's going to output information about your project when you put this on sheets. That is going to set your levels, which you can now very easily establish. And then your grids, which is going to help you establish where your structural elements are. I'd say the only other thing that I want to do before we're done is to just put in a slab floor in here, because when we tell the floor to be a slab, if it changes size in terms of its thickness, we can just edit the type very easily. And if the floor changes in terms of its location, like based on the footprint of the building, the method that we're going to be using to draw that floor is actually going to allow it to adjust the floor shape when we move the walls. So I'm going to get the Architecture tab, Floor tool going. We're going to use just the 4-inch concrete. Again, if that changes, we just change its thickness and it'll update for us. And also, as I said, with the pick wall tool going, when we go around and pick our exterior walls, if we decide that these aren't supposed to be the locations of the exterior walls, that's why we are not using, oh, I'm going to make sure to pick the wall, not the curtain wall. When we select pick wall, not just pick line, it is picking these walls. And that means if one of these walls change, it is going to update the floor for us. Maybe not other stuff, not everything, but at least the floor it would. So we can confidently put that in. And that's enough to get you started.